Hello, and welcome to our special series of Green Elephant interviews during March 2021, supporting the annual B Corp Month. B Corporations, or B Corps for short, are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. Throughout March, we are chatting with key people in companies which have chosen to certify as B Corps and become a force for good. Today I've been joined by Paul Woods from Adopt and Embrace. Adopt and Embrace are a Microsoft Gold partner and have been a certified B Corporation since 2017, I believe. Paul Woods is a founder of Adopt and Embrace. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hey, Mike, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the chance to share our story with your audience.
You're absolutely welcome and looking forward to hearing all about it. So, Adopt and Embrace, why that name?
Yeah, interesting. Lots of hard, long nights thinking about naming a company when you start a company. And I can tell you that the first few names we came up with were absolutely horrendous and embarrassments to my brain and thought processes and things like that. Look, I could tell you the very long story. I'll give you the short story. For almost the entirety of corporate life where technology has had a role within your corporate life, be it, early 90s when we're seeing email emerging, word processing emerging, spreadsheets emerging into corporate life, right through today when we've got lots of cloud technologies like Zoom that we're on now, and Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and Google Docs and all these different technologies that organizations put into, into the workplaces. No matter who you are, no matter where you are in the world, there's this disconnect between the promises that the technology says it's going to deliver and the outcomes that people can get with the technology. So our role as an organization is to basically work with people, teams, departments, organizations to make as much of an impact as possible with the technology at their fingertips. And our focus is Microsoft and Microsoft 365 purely because it's in 95% of the organizations around the world, and it's a consistent challenge or a consistent problem everywhere. Organizations have spent a lot of money on this technology. They spend a lot more money on their people. And if we can connect the two of those together really well, those people can do incredible things. So that's what we get out of bed for in the morning. And Adopt and Embrace was the kind of, we don't just want you to use the technology, we want you to really embrace it and apply it to do something meaningful in your workday as well.
It's really interesting. It's something that I happen to know a lot about. I spent 15 years working for IBM, and I was a CTO myself in IT, so I'm kind of quite familiar with the space and the challenges that you mentioned. And you're absolutely right. The people and the adoption is the major challenge. The technology is kind of secondary a lot of the time. So we'll dive into some of that.
Especially now in the cloud, right? Like sometimes the technology is just a checkbox. Like you turn on a checkbox, or you pull out a credit card, and you've got some great capability there. But that's only 5% of the story. It's how you apply it that makes a difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we mentioned a number of companies, IBM and Microsoft and other things, but kind of office IT-based companies don't tend to be B Corps. It's not a route that traditionally they go down. So why was B Corp status an important thing for you?
Yeah, so a couple of reasons. One of them is incredibly selfish, and one of them is probably a bit more altruistic, I guess, maybe. So as a solo company founder, solo company director, 100% shareholder of a company, it's probably one of the most lonely things you can ever do. And it's difficult because you don't have a co-founder, you don't have a business partner there to bounce ideas off or get guidance or things like that. So when I first saw the B Corporation kind of assessments and programs and all that kind of stuff, I looked at that and said, this is the board of directors that I need as a company to guide the direction of how we set up this company properly and how we do it well, and how we, in the process, get that social license to operate in the markets that we operate in. And I remember the first time we did the B Corp assessment, like our score was horrendously low. I walked into it thinking, we'll 80 points easy, we'll nail this. The original score was like 23 or something like that. we went through the list of all the things that we didn't score well on, and like, well, this is something that a well-run company needs. This is something a well-run company needs. This is something that a well-run, whether it's this policy or this, behavior or practice or value that's come to life. Like all these things are basically there telling, it's almost like a checklist that says, right, if you want to build a well-functioning, sustainable, long-term business for the long term, these are the things that you need to do anyways. So if you park all the community kind of impact side of it, it's actually just a really great tool to build a great business. So that's more the selfish part. I mean, the other part is I've worked in corporate organizations. I've worked for Microsoft in the past. I've worked at a partner that was an IBM partner as well, and all this kind of thing. And the last place I worked, I'd worked there for 9 years and 75 days, and I couldn't make it to the 10 years to unlock my long service leave, just because like that corporate bureaucracy and all the stuff that comes with some big organizations. I just lost the motivation, lost the will to want to participate in that workplace, right? So wanted to create a workplace that one, I would enjoy, secondly, other people would enjoy and be able to do their best at, and three, have some meaning, bring some meaning back into our work and what we do. So when we started the company, it really was a focus on how do we create an organization that is a great place to work, people can be their best and get amazing outcomes for people that either need or want those outcomes in the community. Where the B Corp stuff lines up with that is that a lot of our customers are customers where, like, we're focusing on customers where we know we can have an impact. We know we can improve the lives of people, or reduce the negative impacts on the community and things like that. So we kind of focus our attention in 4 kind of verticals: education being one of them, healthcare being another one. If you just take those 2 by themselves, some of the most impactful industries that are around in terms of our experiences in our life, and the other 2 are public sector, delivery of services, and then retail as well. All of them have large workforces, or most of them have large workforces. All of them have workforces that aren't traditional knowledge workers or information workers that sit behind a desk all day. And the power that technology can have to amplify the impact of these these audiences, these people that have probably been left behind by tech advances over the last 20 years. It's too good to refuse.
I mean, I think that's fascinating, because having spoken to a lot of B Corps, and more as the days go by, I would say 95% of those B Corps say it was because of the impact, because of the social good, the environmental good. That's why they went down the B Corp route. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about the good corporate structure and the good way of running a business, because I think a lot of people miss that. They don't get that side of B Corp. They think it's all about impact and good and that stuff, which that's great, but they don't often think about it's good governance. It's good to treat your people like this. It's good to run your business in this way, and it's it's really interesting to hear you mention that, because it often goes under the radar.
Well, again, going back to something I said earlier, like looking at some of the questions and the assessments as you go through them, and I like then go, that's a really good idea. We should do that. That's a really good idea. We should do that, because I can see how that would help us improve the quality of the talent that we get into the business, or reduce the costs of doing stuff in the business, right? So,
and as you're doing the assessment, you just think, oh, we should be doing that. Oh, we should be doing that. We should be. Exactly. It's just a great reminder, isn't it?
We're going through our recertification at the moment. After 3 years, and we're going through the same process again. Like, oh, I wish we did that. I remembered that we're going to do that after last time, but we didn't end up doing it. So now I'm like, right, we've got to prioritize some of these things to continue to improve the way we run the business as well, not just that initial getting the certification.
Yeah, well, let's get on to that now, because I was going to come to that later, the sort of recertification and impact reporting and things like that. How are you finding the recertification process? Is it easier than the first time? Is it different? Are you different challenges?
I'd say working with B Labs is good. Like, they're good to work with, and they're very thorough, and we expected the thoroughness of the things of going through it. So I think with the recertification, the amount of evidence we've needed to demonstrate is higher than probably the original certification, which hasn't been an issue. Some of the challenges we've faced, particularly here in Australia, there's been some changes in terms of guidance, in terms of codifying B Corp decision-making values into company constitutions and things like that. So we don't have a benefit corporation company structure here in Australia. So it's how do we embed that into our corporate constitution and things like that. So in working through a lot of that stuff, which is not the kind of stuff you can just go update a Word document and, and off you go. Like there's fundamental, corporate regulation and stuff we have to go through. So that's been challenging, but again, nothing that we didn't expect was going to happen. It just takes time to do that. I think the big thing for me is what I mentioned earlier is there was stuff that we went through in the initial certification 3 years ago, and we had great intentions of doing more of it, and we got some of the more of it done. We didn't get all of the stuff that we wanted to do done. So it helped us refocus on some of those areas that we should have been focusing on to improve our score. Now, if I look at our score, like period on period, we'll probably increase a few points maybe, but there's a lot more upside in terms of our alignment to the program. And then like with I'm not sure if the goalposts have shifted just a little bit in the last 3 years, but keeping up with that as well. You've got to kind of keep on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the benefits of the B Corp certification. It isn't a box tick. You pay your money, you get your accreditation. You have to work at it, and it's not. You don't automatically get it the next time, and it's that's valuable because it says to the outside world that it's worth having. Okay, let's come on to adopt and embrace the company and the services. You mentioned that you do sort of a few different verticals. So let's talk a bit about the kind of the specific services that you do, because you've talked about Microsoft and Office and things like that. If you're going into a business, what are the sorts of things that you typically do?
Yeah, look, if you talk to Microsoft, they would classify us as an adoption and change management partner. So we don't do any of the technical work. We're not going out and deploying technology at all. We're just focusing on connecting people to the technology that's there. But we like to think of ourselves more as a business improvement partner or business process improvement partner that organizations can work with. Because like we could go and launch a technology, like here's Teams, here's SharePoint, here's technology X. And we could bombard people with 50 different new ideas about 50 different capabilities, and 48 of them aren't relevant to their role. Or we can go in and say, well, what is the most time-consuming, frustrating thing you do every day as a retail store manager, or a nurse, or a CEO, or a receptionist, or anything in between? Someone who's out in the field counting bats in a tree. Or like what are the time-consuming, frustrating things you do today, and how can we use that thing that's in your pocket, the phone, the iPad that you've got there, the computer that you've got at your desk, to help you overcome those challenges. And that's the work that really gets us out of bed in the morning, is like helping people make that change in their workday, and reduce that frustration, improve that employee experience, and help them achieve more personally professionally in terms of their role, but also personally. Back when we worked in an office, getting out of the office on time, getting your lunch break back, these kinds of things. How to help people get in more control of their workday, using the technology to help them do that, right? So fundamentally, that's the end product of what we deliver. How we deliver that depends on who we're engaging with the customer. So there's more programmatic stuff we can do with an organization that kind of gets that happening at scale, down to executive coaching, one-on-one coaching with people and organizations to help make that change as well. So it's very much every now and then it's just here's a big problem that we need to solve, and we need some thinking about how we just apply all these different puzzle pieces that we've got to help us overcome that.
You come at it from a here's an outcome we need to achieve. Which of the technology stack that we know about will solve that problem? Is that so it's always an outcome that you're seeking to deliver to the customer?
100%. Like one of our values is outcomes, not outputs. And it really ties back to this idea of like Office 365. We just use that as an example. It is a platform of capabilities. There's lots of stuff you can do with it. If you just crack open Word, Excel, Outlook, and PowerPoint, there's 3,500 buttons we could start talking about. There are things that you could do to improve your workday. So there's immense power with these technologies. And if you have a very myopic view of the technologies and say, right, this is how I'm going to use Outlook, or this is how I'm going to use SharePoint, or this is how I'm going to use Teams, or whatever, there's only so much you can do. But if you start with the business process that you're already familiar with, business process that you understand how it works, process that you know how to measure already, and then you go, right, what are the best bits of those 8 or 3 or 5 different capabilities we just talked about there? How do we bring them together as one solution to help you improve that? So, some recent examples I could think about is like a collaborative document creation process. but not just let's get some people working together on a document, but like thinking about the governance and the approval processes that a document goes through. And then how can you use Word and SharePoint and other things to not just have a formal structured yes/no approval process, but one that's a lot more collaborative with all the stakeholders along the way.
Yeah.
Now you could buy something off the shelf to do that and probably spend a fair chunk of coin doing it, or you could just look at what you've got in front of you and go, right, if we configure this a little bit that way, we all agree on the process of how we're going to use technologies together, get that shared expectation, we can very quickly get the outcome that you want to get to as well.
I guess you see.
So that's one example.
Yeah, I mean, I see, and I have seen, and I guess you see this, is Microsoft partners, let's call them, and they will go into a business and they will just install the standard Microsoft suite with Office, and they'll give them email and they'll say, there you go, we're done, go and use that. And there's lots of problems with that.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you've said the outcomes, but I think one thing that, and maybe you can talk about this, is that people often think of Microsoft as Word, Excel, Outlook, SharePoint, Teams, and that's it. Whereas actually, you get into Sway and Delve and SQL Server and .NET,
so much more to it,
and there's a massive, vast estate. And unless you know about that, and more importantly, what you've been saying, how that can deliver your outcome, you either get somebody who just dumps it on you, or you don't get it delivered anyway. I mean, that money you pay every month to Microsoft for your subscription, you get a vast amount of things for it, and people just don't use it.
And there's some incredible capability there. I was, just last night I was showing my wife Power Automate, which is like a workflow automation tool, right? Which again comes with pretty much every single Office 365 license, no matter what you're paying for. But just being able to simply automate, and instead of like having to manually create folders for a new client when she's an accountant, creating new folders for a new client when they come on board, like here's all your folders for 2020, 2019, 2018, and your company tax and your personal tax and all that, which they do manually. I said, well, we can automate that. It'll take us about 10 minutes. You'll have a little button you can press and you go, new client, bang, there's all the folders there, right? And just that alone, like when she went and showed her colleagues today, like that mind-blowing moment of we've been doing it this way for the past 12 years. And we've done it manually the whole time.
That's a
and now
example
every single time we can onboard.
That's a brilliant example of how IT should deliver outcomes. I've done this really easy thing, and it's now saved you an hour of your time every time you get a new customer. It's just brilliant.
And then we extend that conversation to all that communication you do with a new client. Let's sequence some emails to the client. So you press the button, it creates the folders, but also sends the welcome email and the engagement letter and the follow-up email 7 days later to say, hey, just checking in to see how you're going. So it's not just how to use the technology, it's how do we create better employee experiences, but also better customer experiences using this technology as well. And you're spot on. If you look at the breadth of the platforms that you've got there, beyond Word, Excel, SharePoint, that kind of thing, take the best bits of all that, you can do some really incredible things, incredible outcomes in an incredibly cost-effective and quick way.
Because you're already paying for it. You're already paying for Office, and you get all this stuff anyway for free. And I was really interested in what you said about, delivering outcomes for your customers, but, and this comes back to B Corps, is making life and the world better for your employees. I mean, I don't suppose you've got some examples of things you've done for employees to just make their world better.
So the first one I'd say is one of our other values is work is a thing you do, not a place you go. And that was really, really novel. Really novel until about 12 months ago. Then everyone decided to do it with us.
Well, sorry to cut over you, but have you heard of the ROW, the results-oriented work environment? Yeah. So it's sort of part of that, isn't it? And we kind of adopted that a while ago. But brilliant to hear somebody else using it.
So when we started the company 5.5 years ago, like the intention was we're going to be just like remote by default. Yes, we'll have co-working spaces that people can have the choice to drop into if they want to work. So my virtual background at the moment is our co-working space in Brisbane. But you can drop in if you want to, and if you want to use that space, whatever space works for you at home, at a customer site, we don't care. This isn't about presenteeism, it's about you delivering outcomes for customers and outcomes for us as an organization. We trust you to do that. Go and do it.
Yeah.
So that in itself is interesting because it basically took a whole heap of constraints away from us in terms of talent. So who can we bring into the business and where they live? So we've hired people in Perth, like the most remote city in the world. It's the closest city near it with more than 100,000 people. It's like 2,000 kilometers away. And one of our team, John, he lives over in Perth, and like we haven't seen him in person for probably 18 months, 19 months.
Yeah.
But because we have this remote by default philosophy and everyone acts in that way, he's just as included in our team as anyone that would be be able to meet face to face in Brisbane. So like it's just built into the culture that we're creating an inclusive workplace where, irrespective of where you're located in the world, you're an equal contributor to the business and the outcomes that we get. So that's been a key one. I think the other things we've been doing, and the flexible work times, work hours, all that kind of stuff. Again, we don't care what hours you work as long as you're working the average that you're supposed to work, getting outcomes for customers. If you're, this is one that our team kind of hates sometimes. If you're going over that, we actually tell you to stop working. The first few times we've done that for a few of the new starters, they just don't understand why. It's like, no, we want you to stop. Like if you're working after hours, that's not actually acceptable in terms of our culture, because we know you'll keep doing it and you'll burn out and then mistakes happen, and so it's going to cost us more. So just sleep on it.
We have a couple of interesting ones ourselves, which are no meetings are mandatory. You only go if you think it's valuable to you. And another one we have is there's no limit to the amount of paid time off you can have. So if you've done your work, you've delivered all your projects and your programs to your customers, and let's say you've got a week of time, you've done it in 2 or 3 days, go and sit on the beach for the other 3 days. We don't get you've done what we've asked you to do.
Sharing the rewards of your work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Look, so I think there's been definitely like a personal employee experience for our team is just how do we create a workspace that I want to work in. Like me being selfish, but in the process, creating a workspace that other people are keen to work in. One of the things that again we did before COVID was a real emphasis on what is best practice or how to leverage technologies like video conferencing like we're doing now to remain connected and remain engaged. And when it comes down to meetings, like your no mandatory meeting kind of thing, we actually said the fewer meetings we can have, the fewer synchronous interactions we can have like this, the better. But if we're going to meet, we do it really, really well. And so it's not about just brute force meetings to get through the day. Like we should only be meeting face to face once or twice a day. I would say once or twice a week potentially. And any other time, it should be asynchronous. It's through a text-based medium that allows people to engage in that when their energy can focus on it. So it's not us dictating when people need to be engaged in the work. It's the employees and kind of dictating it to align to their. Some people are really great in the morning. Some people are really great in the afternoon. Some people are night owls.
Absolutely.
So why don't you just focus your energy when it makes sense for you? And we don't care if you're sleeping until 10 a.m. Because we know that you're in there at 8 p.m. putting your best effort, your discretionary effort into work. So being flexible like that has a huge impact.
We call it, there's no such thing as early. There's no such thing as late.
Yeah.
So and it doesn't matter.
And a lot of our customers deal with this, but they've put like artificial barriers in place to get the value out of it. So a lot of customers, they span multiple time zones. So they're actually the perfect candidates for this, but they make their teams stay up until 11 o'clock at night to get on a video call for a meeting that could have been a Teams message or an email or something like that, right? So it's how do you use this asynchronous communication to keep people connected, to allow people to contribute at a time that makes sense for them. So they're kind of philosophies that we take into our customer work as well. And like in terms of impact with our customers and employee experience for them, like especially during COVID, we've seen a lot of examples of businesses or organizations that may have just had to shut up shop completely because there wasn't actually a practical way for them to deliver their services. And we've helped them to think about how they digitize some of that process to get the outcome, which is remain trading or continue to deliver things. So we worked with a hospital here in Brisbane. They have an education unit that trains nurses, and the last thing we need to do is to stop training nurses when we're going into a pandemic and having new fresh nursing capability energy coming in, right? So working with them to take a very traditional classroom based 18-month course, diploma of nursing course that these nurses are going through, and in 2 weeks transition that into an online learning experience that isn't just a replication of video-based lectures, but actually helping people engage in a way, because like most of them have care responsibilities as well. And if they're trying to do stuff from home, they've got 2 kids in the background whilst they're trying to study, that's not the perfect environment to sit on a 3-hour lecture and try and focus, right? So so helping them make that transition. But then as here in Australia, been very lucky that we've had some lockdowns, but basically through the bulk of it now, is that all these behaviors of digitizing work or digitizing education are now being continued forward as well. So you've got a longer term impact of a sustainable improvement in the way that we do things, sustainable impact that comes out of it, which is the stuff that's really exciting for us. It's not just a band-aid for COVID and everyone goes back to the way they do things. There's genuinely been an improvement in the way we deliver an experience for our customers or for our employees.
Oh, it's a endlessly fascinating area, this whole working experience thing, and it sounds like we've got some of the similar approaches, and we could talk about this for a long time.
Well, just one thing that kind of ties it back to the B Corp side of things as well. If you get this right, like for an organization like us, where like we're really a knowledge-based organization, we have our value is people. Like we don't have infrastructure like machinery or factories or things like that. In pretty much any organization like us, the biggest contribution to carbon footprint or impact is air travel. And before COVID, like I'd do 80 or 90 flights a year around the country, trying to sell a stream of remote work and things like that, but still having to go and do it in person because no one quite understood it yet. And part of the B Corp program, like we were actively trying to reduce that because that was just one of our goals, was to keep reducing our emissions. And so we keep reducing the number of flights we took. That had a significant impact on that. And then COVID comes along, and I haven't been on a plane for work in 11 months. So our carbon impact is basically reduced to zero in terms of like the way that we're contributing through our work and our work practices. So I think the upside of all this is that even if half the travel that we used to do diminishes because we're embracing technologies like we're doing right now, or new behaviors in terms of how we connect with people, that's an incredible outcome in itself.
Absolutely.
The airlines will still survive. There'll still be people that need to go places. The flights might not be as regular, but I think it'll have a broader impact beyond just saving some money and saving some time.
I think it's the reduction, isn't it? It'd be unreasonable to say in the course of your business you never go and meet anybody and speak to them, because sometimes you can't replace the face-to-face, but it can be reduced a huge amount. Have you come across an organization called Zero Carbon 2030 in Brisbane?
No,
I spoke to them a couple of weeks ago, and they've released a new ratings app, and they're trying to look at the carbon footprints of companies. But I just mentioned them because they're in Brisbane too. Doing some interesting things. They're a non-profit.
Nice.
Interesting. I'll link you up. But yes. So, is there any kind of a tip, an action, something you could recommend for listeners to kind of go and do? What's one thing you'd say?
So I could give you lots of tips. Let's think of ones around something that's top of mind for all of us when we're working from home and trying to create that really sustainable employee experience where we've got we work inside our personal lives. We work inside our 9-to-work lives a lot of the time. Look, one of my passions is I did a bit of research into this at university as well for my master's, is around work-life balance and borders, and how you keep those borders sustainable otherwise. And look, there's kind of 3 parts to it. There's the physical border that kind of wraps around your workplace. That's the door that you can close. So remembering that, if you're working from home and you've got the ability to close a door and kind of get yourself away from that life, that's great. And then on the flip side of that, as you move out of work, closing the office door behind you at home, that's a physical border you can put in place. There's temporal borders to work life, so time of day that you do things as well. So if you're going to sustainably do this work at home thing for a long time, try and find some regularity in terms of when that border will be. So you're not going to do anything work related until 9 o'clock in the morning, irrespective of whether or not the office is just there or the laptop is just there. That's the kind of the barrier. So you've got some clear borders there. And then there's the last one is the psychological border. And as a company founder or an executive, sometimes this is the hardest one to close off. But it's making sure that you're trying to put some strength into the border in terms of when you think about your work as well, and try and either distract yourself with activities that kind of draw your attention away from that. It might be going to the gym or exercising in the garage or whatever it is, or watching a TV show. But making sure you're actively trying to strengthen that psychological border as well.
Yeah.
And from an employee well-being point of view, that just can make a huge impact, particularly with everyone being remote. Some of those things people can't do though. So this is if you're a business owner or a manager there, if you've got someone working from their kitchen table and they can't close a door behind them, like there's other things you might need to put in place to help them manage that work-life, that border, and not burn out and not overwork. But the key thing with all that is, as a manager and an employee, just make sure you have a conversation about the biggest impact in terms of work-life border, bleeding and flow over and all that kind of stuff is just misaligned expectations between yourself and your manager. So if you just have an honest conversation about what's working, what's not working, and if you can come to some common ground, I think you're going to have a far better employment relationship or employee experience with your team as well. So that's just like a personal impacty kind of thing. But also, recycle as well. You should do that too. all the other tips that we could give.
All the other stuff. The work-life balance thing is really interesting. Have you read? There's a book called The One Thing, and I forget the author, but he talks about work-life balance, and he says that it's a bit of a myth because they're always out of balance to some extent. And he talks about the work-life counterbalance is that at some points, for whatever reason, the work is going to be intense and there's going to be a lot of it. But then you need to bring the counterbalance at some point in the personal life, and you need to make sure that you always have a counterbalance. So it's not about being balanced the whole time, because that's
I'd agree with
unrealistic.
that.
It's about making sure you do, balance it back the other way.
You need to be purposeful. You need to own it as an employee, but as a manager, you need to make sure that you're reminding people to make sure they put their balance in place. Like the amount of times I have to say to one of our team, I'm expecting you to sleep in tomorrow. Like don't do a late night and then try and come up, be online at 8 o'clock in the morning, because it's just crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any resource, a book, a film, a YouTube, whatever, something like that you'd recommend to listeners to go and look at?
Oh, look, I think if you're interested in creating workspaces or creating work that allows employees to be their best, to have more meaningful, work being more meaning, things like that. There's a book called Work Doesn't Have to Be Like This, I think it's called, by from the gentleman who started Basecamp, the software company. So David Hannemeyer, I'm going to completely screw up his name. I'm so sorry. DHH.
We'll find it and we'll put it in the show notes for people.
Jason. Look, I've never met them before. I've read a lot of their books and a lot of their blog posts, and they're pretty switched on in terms of, and kind of at the forefront of this remote work, revolution, when it was 10 years ago, when that's what it was called. But a lot of their philosophies in terms of how they design work, how to communicate inside organizations and things like that, like their stuff that we've applied within our business, and they make a big difference. Happy to plug our book if you wanted me to as well. We read
go for it. I mean, we'll put a link to the Basecamp one, but
yeah, definitely do that. For those of you in the Microsoft ecosystem that have Microsoft Teams at work, and you're trying to figure out how to make the most out of that technology, we wrote a book specifically for managers to help them come to terms with how to design teamwork and design collaboration spaces that help you get really great outcomes. So it's called Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams, a manager's guide to communication, collaboration, coordination with Microsoft Teams. You can grab it anywhere. It's on Amazon, Book Depository, all those kind of places. But teamsbook.info is the link.
Great.
But
we'll link that up as well.
Or if you don't want to buy it, just watch our YouTube channel where I'm live reading it at the moment. And it's a pretty experience, so it might be better just to buy the book. So.
Yeah, great. So Paul, if people want to link up with you, where's the best place to get hold of you?
Yeah, look, so from a corporate point of view, adoptandembrace.com is the website. But for me, I'm happy to connect with people on LinkedIn, and I think if anyone's got an interest or passion in creating workspaces that are great for people, that places where people want to work, or organizations that are great for people to work, aligned to B Corp values and things like that, just reach out on LinkedIn. Search for Paul Woods. There's probably 4,000 Paul Woodses on LinkedIn, so I'll be the one that's based in Brisbane that works for Adopt and Embrace. Apart from that, I'm on Twitter as well, which is probably the easier place to find me. I'm just at Paul Woods on Twitter.
Yeah.
You can find me
there.
Well,
we'll make it very easy. We'll put all those links on the show page so listeners can go and find Paul. And great. Thanks, Paul. It's now time for what is often my favourite time of the week, but sometimes not, where we play a little game called Fact or Fake. And what I'm going to do, Paul, is I'm going to read you a few statements, and what I need you to do is just say to me whether they are a fact or whether I've made it up. Essentially, it's a fake. Okay. So are you feeling ready?
There is definitely a fact and a fake, though. You're not going to faking me out with two fakes or two facts or anything like that.
Well, there's three of them, so there might
Oh my
be.
goodness! Yeah.
There might be three of each. Who knows?
All
Or
right,
three
all
of all.
We'll
So
see.
you've got to use your wits to. But hopefully, it's in an area that you hopefully are familiar with. So it's the first one. Microsoft has a gender balance of 3/4 male to female.
So I would say, so this is a tough one because it really depends, because I know Microsoft a bit too well, and it would depend on where you're thinking about. So if I think about Australia, I would say that they're
this is globally
almost 50. Yeah, I know. In Australia, they're almost 50-50.
Yeah.
But I would say that would be close to a fact. I think it'd be close to it.
It is, and it's. I think that the behind that fact is it's much better than it was. So 25,
I was going to say, yeah, absolutely.
25% globally are now female. So that's better than where it was sort of 5 or 10 years ago, where it was kind of about 12 or 14%.
You would know this from working in the IT industry. It's very male-dominated industry, and we're proud to say that we're 60-40 female male at Adopted Embrace. So we're kind of we're going the other direction.
So Microsoft is moving in the direction, if not quite there yet.
Yeah, correct.
Number two. So Microsoft Office was first launched for the Mac in 1989 before it was released for Windows.
That is a fact.
That is a fact. You obviously know your Microsoft Office well. So most people think it was a Windows, but it was launched for the Mac first, which is an interesting one.
The old fun fact we used to talk about, that the most successful bit of software on Mac before like the iPhone and iPad revolution was Microsoft Office, and no one would believe you, but it's by a long way the most successful product on the Macintosh platform.
So you've got two right. So you come out on top. Let's see if I can get a consolation with this third one. And this is really in your space. Usage of Microsoft Teams has jumped 100% in the last 6 months.
That's fake, because the number's a lot higher than that.
Okay. And
maybe I've got better data. I'm not sure.
talk about your reasoning. So usage worldwide of Microsoft Teams in the last 6 months.
Yeah. So it's I can go off two things. It's the publicly released.
So you're right. But
yeah. So I think whether it's Microsoft Teams, whether it's Zoom, whether it's other technologies that support remote work, they've all seen an explosion of usage across the world, right? I think like I see it. There's a chart with Zoom on it, which just basically goes vertical in terms of active users when the pandemic hit, right? So, and Microsoft Teams exactly the same kind of growth trajectory that they've had. So yeah, I think if I look at our customer base before, like let's extend over 9 months, right? So when the pandemic hit and things like that, we had customers that would, some of them had gone in and done a lot of work with it, and maybe 50-60% of their organization might be using it. Lots of other ones around 8%, 3%, 2%. If we look at the data now, they're all sitting at somewhere between 80 and 95% of their workforce using the technology and to keep connected and keep their business running and things like that. And look, I think the biggest challenge for organizations like Microsoft and Zoom and like ourselves as well is how do you sustain that when you don't have the constraints of lockdowns to make sure people continue to use it? So like our goal at the moment is to not just, we've done the brute force work at home thing. Now let's make it the sustainable, a great place to work thing now. And I think that's the biggest challenge organizations have to face, particularly if you've got half the workforce going into the office, half working from home, which didn't necessarily happen as much before. And I think that's the biggest employee experience barrier or roadblock or speed bump that organizations have to handle in the next 3 years, is that what does returning to work really look like?
Because some people will want to be in the office and see people. Some people will be very happy working remotely, and you need to allow for both. And it's
That's it.
a challenge. Brilliant. Paul, well, with that defeat, again, I get beaten all the time. Well done,
they
Paul.
were good questions.
Well done.
And I'm glad they're in my area domain knowledge, because I think it would have been a lot poorer if it was other areas.
I could have been unfair and picked something else, but I thought, you've done us the favour of being a guest on our show, and so yeah. Thank you, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's been so interesting, and this space is really fascinating, and maybe we'll speak about it again in future, because the cultural change and shift that IT can bring is a really, really fascinating area. It's far more fascinating than the technology itself, I think. So, look, I just really want to thank you.
As someone who has a Unix administration certification, I can absolutely 100%. This space is so much more interesting than technology sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Brilliant. Thank you for your time, Paul. And
no worries. Appreciate it.
Great. We really hope that you found this special B Corp Month episode both informative and entertaining. Make sure you don't miss any of the other 31 interviews with B corporations who are striving to be a force for good. So make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a thing. And don't forget to spread the word with others. If you have any questions about being or becoming a B Corp, or any comments and suggestions about the show, please do get in touch. You can email studio@greenelephant.show, or visit our website greenelephant.show, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube or Twitter by searching for Green Elipod or The Green Elephant Show. You can also review the show on Google and Apple Podcasts. Join us tomorrow, and we hope you have a sustainable day.